Folks, and today I thought I would talk about progressive overload. So progressive overload is one of the many names for the theory and training that if you want to improve, you've got to be able to push your body just a bit farther than where it's been. So if you want to go out and run 3 miles a day, 5 days a week, and you just keep doing it, at some point in time, your fitness is going to get to a point it's going to level off. It's not going to go anywhere. That's not to say you can't continue to do that, but you're just not going to become any more fit. You're not going to be faster, and most people want to become more fit. They want to be faster. In order to do that, you generally have to push your body just a bit farther. And notice I emphasize it's a bit because they're not big changes. They're usually very small changes as you kind of creep it forward. Now, you've got two ways that you can challenge the body. Basically, it's volume and intensity. Rest and recovery is also in there, but primarily it's volume. How much are you running, and intensity, how fast you are running, are the typical ways that you're going to do that. Now, I need to be clear. All running counts, and where you're coming from counts as well. What else you've been doing in the past, paces you've run in the past. There's lots of things that come into that. And when I say all running is you can't just look at any one workout and say what you should do. And I'll get people to say, hey, what do you think I should do for my long run this weekend? And there's no way to answer that question without knowing everything else that's really going on. Here would be the analogy, because I love analogy. Can you imagine if somebody came up to you and said, hey, I'm making a cake. How much sugar should I put in my cake? Well, you can't answer that. What kind of a cake are they making? Do they need any sugar at all? What kind of a batch are they making? There's a lot of questions you have to understand before you can possibly tell them how much sugar to put into their cake. So running is the very same thing. All the running you're doing has to count. So even though I'm going to show you a very specific static example of a type of run, you really have to consider the context. So in the example I'll use of how progressive overload might work, we'll talk about a tempo run. And for the sake of example, let's say this person's tempo pace is an 8-minute mile. So a common workout might be they're going to run 2 miles easy, they're going to do 2 miles at that 8 pace, and they're going to do 2 miles easy. And you could do that. That's a good tempo workout. It's about 16 minutes in that tempo zone. You usually want about 20, but you're 16, whatever. And you could just do that. At some point in time, you won't gain any more improvements from that, and that might be fine because maybe you're working on some other aspect of your training. But let's say this is something that you're really working to improve. Well, you don't want to be doing that all the time. So a way it might look, and there are multitudes of ways that it could look, is maybe 1 week you do 3 by 1 mile at 8. And you might do that 1 week, you might do it a couple weeks. It's not to say that all these are just 1 week, but you do 3 by 1 mile at 8. Then after that, you do 2 miles at 8. So before, you were doing that 8 pace for a total of 3 miles, but you had some rest in between because it was 3 by 1 mile. Now we're going to say, hey, body, I'm going to give you a little bit less volume, but it's going to be harder because we're going to do 2 miles straight through at that pace. And maybe do that for a week or two. And then we say, okay, well now, instead of 3 by 1 mile, I'm going to do 2 by 1.5 miles. It's the same amount of volume I had up front, but I'm doing it a little bit longer again. And then maybe I'm going to go to 2.5 miles straight through. Then maybe I'm going to do 2 mile and then 1.5 mile. But the idea is you kind of keep ticking it, making it just a little bit harder than it was before, a little bit being the key, so your body has to adjust. And at some point in time, you might get to the point where, you know what, I can't do more miles. So there are limits to how much tempo work that you want to do in any one workout. It might be time to change the paces up a little bit. So maybe now you're going to say, hey, I'm going to do that 3 by 1 mile again. But this time I'm going to do them at 8, 7:55, and 7:50. I'm going to do a little bit faster. And then after that, I'm going to do 2 miles, but I'm going to do it at 7:50 now instead of 8. So in the first examples, I was really changing the volume more than anything. Now I'm saying, well, not only am I going to change the volume, put the volume back a little bit, but I'm going to change the intensity. So that's an example of how you might do some progressive overload as it relates to a tempo run. Now, again, I want to emphasize it isn't just one run. What you're doing needs to be taken in context with everything else that you're doing in the week. And there are times where you might want to freeze. I mean, you're not going to work on tempo work forever. There's going to be a time where you say, you know what, I'm kind of done working on the tempo work. We've gotten to a particular pace and volume that I like, and we're staying there because we're working on something else. Whether it be building your overall volume. Maybe your long runs are going to start ramping up because you're doing a marathon, or maybe it's time to inject some speed work and you're going to be doing that someplace else. So you don't just keep progressing forever, but you're doing that progression during the time that you're working on those. So again, remember, it's not just one run. At some point in time, you freeze, but if you want to get better, you have to progress.